Hello, everybody. If I'm looking a little frazzled, it's because I've been sitting here all afternoon giving you feedback on your rough drafts, but they're finally done. We had some issues with the LMS yesterday, so I couldn't post. I wanted to get them all done and get all the feedback to you guys yesterday, and then I couldn't do that because we had glitches all day long, which you probably noticed too. But anyway, I've given all of you guys feedback, those of you who submitted your essays to me. Um, if you didn't submit a rough draft to me, you're still going to be able to submit the final copy. It just means that I'm not going to have any feedback to give you before the final copy is due. So you're not losing any marks here, but you're also not gaining feedback from me. So I'm sorry if you weren't able to meet that deadline, but I wouldn't have been able to give you feedback in time if you submitted it any later than the due date. So because we had issues with the learning management system, I've shifted the due date. I've given you an extra day because I needed an extra day. So it's no longer due on the 27th by midnight. It's now due on the 28th by midnight. So I hope that helps you out a bit. I just wanted to, because some of you didn't submit a rough draft, I wanted to just go over with everybody what my kind of overall observations were about your essays so that you don't make those mistakes in your good copy. Okay, so I'll try to remember them all. One, you guys are not following MLA format. Okay, some of you are, but many of you are not. So I'm going to post. I've posted as feedback for most of you guys a link to the Purdue site that has the MLA citation guide. It's all online. You can Google it yourself. But you need to follow that because that's actually all the stuff that we did in the first unit. And if you're not demonstrating that on your essay, it's really serious because that's all supposed to be stuff that you learned how to do. So I'm going to be pretty strict about it when I'm good copies. And along with that, most of you guys are citing the lines from the play properly, but then you've got a bunch of secondary sources listed and you're not citing them within the body of your essay. You need to do that. You can't just list them at the end. You need to cite your sources throughout the essay, and there are examples of how to do that on the link that I'm going to post. But that again is all stuff from Unit 1. So you don't just have to cite the play. If you use any external sources, you have to cite those as well. You can't just list them in your works cited at the end. You have to cite them throughout your essay. Okay, so there's that. Some other comments. Some of you guys didn't read the assignment. One of the things that it says in the assignment is that you're supposed to choose a specific passage from Act 4 and talk about how a particular audience would understand that passage based on their cultural, political, economic context. So in other words, if you're choosing the original version of Hamlet and you're thinking about how it would be performed in front of an Elizabethan audience, then you're referring to what it says in the text. And you're talking about how an Elizabethan audience would interpret that information. So think to yourself, what is it that an Elizabethan audience is going to pick up on that a modern audience might not? So for example, there might be certain allusions, certain references to political events or historical events or even cultural things that an Elizabethan audience will just know that a modern audience won't. So things like references to the Great Chain of Being or language of flowers or certain kind of historical references. If you don't want to talk about an Elizabethan audience, talk about a modern audience. But in that case, then you need to be looking at a film version of Hamlet, and this is all explained in the assignment. And you need to look at what the directors and actors have done to appeal to a modern audience, because there are some things that a modern audience isn't just going to naturally pick up on that an Elizabethan audience would know. So how do they make it appeal? How do they make it relevant for a modern audience? Okay, so either one of those. But then you need to be making reference to specific things from a movie version of Hamlet. So please make sure you read the instructions clearly. Another thing, you need to make sure that your thesis statement is clearly expressed towards the end of the first paragraph. Some of you guys needed to make your introduction into 2 paragraphs, and that's okay, but it should still clearly be part of your introduction, and your thesis should come towards the end of it, where you're making a very clear and specific statement about how something within the passage you've chosen would be interpreted by whatever audience you've chosen, okay? So for example, let's say I'm going to use Rebecca, I'm going to use your example. You would talk about how an Elizabethan audience would understand what the flowers that Ophelia hands out mean. Okay, those are things that a modern audience wouldn't necessarily pick up on. So you talk about that and you talk about how that affects the way that the audience interprets that scene. All right? And you make a statement about that. So you would say, in the scene, and I can't remember what scene that is right now, but in Act 4 scene, blah, 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 when Ophelia distributes flowers, an Elizabethan audience would understand that the flowers mean blah, blah, blah. I'm going to use blah a lot in this video. Because of their, that was a cultural understanding that the Elizabethan audience would have that a modern day audience wouldn't have. Okay? Let me see what else. Don't try to pad your essay. Don't try to make it sound wordier or try to find a wordier way to say a simple thing. I much prefer that you choose the clearest, most simple way to express your idea. I'm not going to be impressed by big words if there's a smaller word that's more accurate. Okay? So think about what it is that you mean to say and then find the clearest way to express that. And one of the ways you can do that is by making sure you're not using passive voice. So passive voice occurs when you remove the person doing the action from the sentence. So rather than saying, Ms. Barker picked up her water bottle and took a drink, you would say something like, the water bottle was picked up by Ms. Barker. And do you see what you're doing there? So what you're doing is you're kind of distorting the meaning. Politicians do this a lot. So rather than implicate the person who's doing the action, you focus all the attention on the action itself. So you put the person who's doing it at the end of the sentence and focused on the water bottle. And most of the time, that just leads to a lack of clarity. So you need to watch for that. Let me see if there's anything else. There are some other things, but in general, those are the most obvious things that I noticed. And so hopefully those of you who, hopefully that will help you guys before you submit your final copy, whether you submitted something for me to edit or not. And those of you guys who did submit your rough drafts, for the most part, you're going to notice that most of my comments are on the first page or two. Because I just don't have time to go through and make every single correction throughout. But I'm assuming that I've made, if I've made a comment that you've got comma splices in the first page, that you're going to look throughout the rest of your essay and see if you made any more. Okay, so apply those comments that I made on the first couple pages to your entire essay when you're doing your revisions. And after that, I do want to finish by saying I really have enjoyed reading your rough drafts. They're really very insightful and interesting, and I can't wait to see what you do with them for the final copies. So I may have one more video announcement for you a little bit later this week because we need to talk a little bit more about Life of Pi and your ISP essays because we're getting really close to the end of the course here and things are going to move quickly. So good luck, work hard, and I'll talk to you guys later.